Dear professional students, this is study pack of Nigeria Labor Law. This course is one of the courses in level 2 or in professional level 2 of Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, CIPM. And the course, which is known as Nigerian Labor Law, has 10 well-crafted chapters. And it is these chapters we are going to look at in this session. What I mean by this session is, under this Nigerian Labor Law, we are going to look at 10 different chapters. But without wasting much of our time, we start with the history and the sources of Nigerian law or sources of Nigerian labor law. And under this heading, our learning objective as follows. At the end of this chapter, our reader or listener is supposed to be able to explain, appropriate and apply the following concepts to employment relation in Nigeria and beyond. First, we start with historical overview of labor law in Nigeria. We'll look at the source of labor law. We'll look at the received laws. We also talk about the freedom of contract, which is known as Pacta Sunt Servanda. And lastly, we'll look at the guided intervention of 1968. Now, when we are talking of labor law actually regulates the relationship between the masters and the servant, or the relationship that exists between the servant and the master, or using the modern day phrase, the employer and the employee. That is what the labor law actually regulates. Relationship between employer, which is known as master, and employee, which is known as workers or servants. The essence of this regulation is to actually prevent friction and create a conducive atmosphere for industrial harmony, efficiency of labor, high productivity. Not only that, it's also to engender profit maximization, socio-economic welfare of workers, economic development, which has multiplier effect on improving the living or the standard of living of larger society. Not only that, this labor law, it is basically to put things in order in our work environment. So modern day labor law and the labor agitation in Nigeria originated from colonialism. And as a result of this, the present labor legislation is a product of common law and English jurisprudence. In essence, without wasting our time, the British labor law, it is what was adapted and we shape it to Nigerian law, because British, they are what? They are our colonial master, and most of the things they were doing were actually imported to us, and we also accepted it hook, line and sinker. And applying Karl Marx development analysis movement from communism to feudalism, through feudalism to capitalism, and eventually to socialism. And one may now submit that the changes that occur from the feudal system in England to capitalism, which places the means of production and distribution in the hand of a capitalist. When we are talking of capitalism, we are talking of individual that owns a property. And this situation accounted for the struggle between the labor and the capital. So there are perpetual struggle between the labor and the capital. So the capitalists want to have the larger part of what is produced, while the labor want to earn a sustainable and an adequate living. As a result of this struggle between the labor and capital, the need for the regulation of this relationship is actually paramount in maintaining industrial harmony. And This man, which is known as Roscoe Pound, this man propounded that law is the instrument of social engineering, while Roberto Algar contributed that law is the glue that holds the society together. Labor law we are saying here actually regulates labor relationship in every economy. And when we are talking of the history of labor law in Nigeria, the labor law is the branch of law that regulates industrial relations, employer-employee relations, and all aspects connected to terms of employment and condition of work. Labor law is also referred to as employment law or industrial law. However, the law must regulate labor or employment and every matter connected or incidental thereto. So the issue of industrial relation in Nigeria can be traced back to the colonial era when formal and semi-formal employment relations were established by the British. However, prior to the advent of colonial master to the region, which is known as Nigeria today, there has been what look like employment relationship and which Elias described as cooperative labor system, whereby the member of the cooperative group are paid in service rather than monetary value. That is what we are practicing in the past. And we said, according to Elias, it was called what? It was called cooperative labor system. In Yoruba, they call it Owe. People will gather together, they choose a particular day to work in someone's farm or to work for someone, and another day to work for another person. Also within the group, people of the age grade come together and they start working for one and the other. That is what we know as cooperative labor system. And what they exchange is not money, but service. So the advent of industrial revolution in 18th century and coming of European into Nigeria introduced wages earning system into Nigeria. Thus, the master-servant relationship, or better put, the employer-employee relationship was also began. And the British came to Nigeria with its modern industrial practice and law and introduced the formal labor relation and employment policies. However, the former policy was not without its shortcomings, as Nigerian economic, social, political, and traditional structure were actually maimed. The ever-present central issue, industrial relation, which is struggle between the Nigerian worker and the colonial master, led to the incarceration of what? Of Michael Imudu, labor union leader, and other unionists. There was also the ugly events that happened in 1949 when a coal worker was shot dead at Iva Valley, Enugu, just because of agitation for better terms and conditions for their services. The British administration influenced labor law and movement in Nigeria via some reforms and innovations. For instance, British administration created the first trade union in Nigeria, and that was in 1912, and was later made an ordinance which allowed for formation of trade union in 1938. The Nigerian labor law is based on English common law. The principle of equity and statute of general application that were enforced in England on January 1990. So the Nigerian Civil War broke out in 1967. This influenced the pre-independence labor movement in Nigeria, and it led to a shift from what? From fundamental common principle of laissez-faire doctrine to the it leads to what? To common law principles of laissez-faire doctrine of non-interference to that of guided intervention. Let me just explain this. When we are talking of laissez-faire doctrine of non-interference, is that government is not looking at what is happening in the industry, in the company. Government leaves it to what? To the employer to determine what he wants to do with his employee. That is what we know as laissez-faire doctrine of non-interference. But later, after the war, it moved towards to be guided intervention. So guided intervention, it is when government is now contributing and looking into what is actually happening in the industrial world. So thus a shift from the strict application of common law principles or rules to statutory provisions was necessary to meet the exigency of the war time. However, the common law principles are still applicable where the statutes are silent or inadequate. For instance, the principle of common law in negligence was established in Donoghue and Stevenson. These are still very useful in determining the level of duties of care that exist between the master and his or her servant. So that is a little history regarding Nigerian labor law.